We've been seeing a lot of recalls lately. Cucumbers, ice cream, and tonight you can add pot to the list. For a second time in the past few weeks, products are being pulled from dispensaries.
More than 60,000 marijuana products sold to dispensaries and manufacturers are recalled in Missouri.
A warning tonight to marijuana users in southern Colorado as a health alert has been issued over a marijuana flower sold across our state.
After they were found to have exceeded acceptable limits established for total yeast and mold.
The state's Cannabis Control Division is warning cannabis users of a recall of certain products.
OLCC has issued a recall for several batches of cannabis due to concerns of mold and heavy metals. More than 9 batches of cannabis tested positive for the mold aspergillus and heavy metals cadmium and mercury.
The state's Office of Cannabis Policy has now issued its second recall in a month. All the items affected are the frosted cookie strain. The state says the yeast and mold levels are too high for bacteria.
Leaders in Massachusetts are looking into moldy marijuana.
Tonight, the California Department of Cannabis Control recalling more than a dozen strains of weed products statewide.
So as you guys can see, mold contamination, recalls, yeast contamination, all these types of contamination are really popping up and becoming a more common occurrence. Is that something we should be worried about? Because heck, it seems that it's happening all over the US, lots of different states. And it doesn't matter whether it's rec or medical, it seems that it's happening across the board. So what we're going to do today is have a look at that in detail, try to figure out what's causing it and how you guys can avoid it, and what states are really feeling the bear of the brunt. Because right here where I'm at, we had about 3 or 4 within the past few weeks. It's actually pretty crazy. So what we're going to do is start off in Missouri, where dispos are pulling over 60,000 products from the shelves. Let's check that out.
This one-of-a-kind recall and how local dispensaries are responding.
If you recently purchased edibles or drinks from a dispensary in Missouri, make sure to check to see if those items are not among the product recall list. Thousands of marijuana products are sold at dispensaries across Missouri are being recalled. Stores across the state removed the products from their shelves immediately, including Starbucks in University City.
The recall has not been easy, but we are, still working with the state, and we're working with our vendors to make sure that everything is being taken care of.
The Missouri Division of Cannabis Regulations has issued a product recall for more than 60,000 products sold at dispensaries and manufacturers.
About 60,000 package IDs. In those package IDs, you could have anywhere from 10 to 100 products in there. So, this is a lot more than just 60,000 products.
Now, regulators said the products were sold by Franklin County-based Delta Extraction, and they were not compliantly tracked so the state could verify they were derived from Missouri-grown marijuana and passed required testing. Delta Extraction released a statement and said, they are prepared to take all necessary legal action in response to these baffling assertions and affirm their record of transparency and compliance for their state products manufactured and sold in Missouri. The company goes on to say they passed all state inspections with flying colors. In addition, no one has reported any adverse reactions to the products so far. And to find out the complete list of the recalled items, you may download our news app.
Now, one thing we do know is that in a lot of states where there's rec or med, there's a lot of restrictions when it comes to how you can actually sell, process, and do all sorts of stuff, even when it comes to the handling of the products. Like taking California for an example, there's so many restrictions in terms of disposal of the leaves, making sure there are certain tests that have to be abided by and followed, and certain levels of certain types of bacteria, heavy metals, and all those stuff that really can't be overlooked. But like I said, it's not only in Missouri, so let's have a look at what's going on down in New Mexico.
The state's Cannabis Control Division is warning cannabis users of a recall of certain products. The CCD issued the Consumer Health and Safety Advisory today. It says, pre-roll and roll your own cannabis products made and sold by JBS Technologies tested positive for a banned pesticide. The products were distributed to retailers from January of this year up until this week. The CCD has a full list of the products and retail locations impacted on its website. Consumers who purchased a recalled product are advised to destroy it or return it to the retailer for disposal.
So what I found pretty interesting there was that he said, pre-rolls and roll your own products, those have been affected by the recall. And that just sets a light bulb off in my head. That's why you can't beat the homegrown. Homegrown for the win. You know what's going in there, you know what's coming out of it. And just a quick reminder, guys, if you're getting value from this video, please do like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And if you want to support us further, join the ICANN VIP Bean Club or shop the merch store and grab some merch. Now, down in Oregon, they're also facing some of these issues, so let's check out what type of recalls they're facing.
OLCC has issued a recall for several batches of cannabis due to concerns of mold and heavy metals. According to the OLCC, more than 9 batches of cannabis tested positive for the mold aspergillus and heavy metals cadmium and mercury. The products were sold to about 75 different Oregon retailers, including Greenworks Farm and Nectar Markets. This happened between January and June of this year. The agency has told retailers and other licensees to stop selling and distributing the products, but they're also asking people to check any of the products you may have at home. The recall came after a routine audit of inventory in the state's cannabis tracking system on June 21st.
So clearly, these are issues that are not limited to certain states. It's across the board. And what's also interesting is that certain large-scale growers who are growing for a lot of these dispos, a lot of these companies, it seems that they're affecting a lot of these people. So for instance, one grow facility is supplying multiple companies. In that instance, all those companies will be affected by the recall simply because that one grow facility did not manage their processes properly. Now, so far we've heard about the recalls due to mold, pesticides, heavy metals, but what about when you throw yeast into the mix? Anyone remember that White Chicks movie where they were talking about Pamela Anderson with a yeast infection? Oh.
Carmen Electra or Pam Anderson? Easy. But they both got a yeast infection.
That's tough. I'm gonna go with Pam Anderson.
You're disgusting.
What?
They got a yeast infection.
Well, down in Maine, it seems that there's been recalls for mold and yeast detection, so let's have a look at that.
The state's Office of Cannabis Policy has now issued its second recall in a month. This one is for pre-ground adult-use cannabis flower, pre-rolls, and blunts produced by Nova Farms. All the items affected are the frosted cookie strain. The state says the yeast and mold levels are too high for bacteria. The products were sold at 14 retail stores here in Maine between September 17th and the 8th of October. The state now advising people to throw these products out or return them.
Now, following a lot of these reports, they say either toss the products out, destroy it, or return it. But my question is, if I return it, am I getting a full refund? Because you sold me something that's not good, so I should be getting a full refund, right? I should be entitled to my money back. Now let's pop over to Massachusetts and California real quick so that we can figure out what's going on in those two states before we find out which state seems to have a really bad problem because they had 4 recalls in less than 1 month. But let's start off right here in Massachusetts.
Leaders in Massachusetts are looking into moldy marijuana. It was sold across the Commonwealth, including Bristol County. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Patrice Wood. Dan Janig is off tonight. One expert says he's been sounding the alarm about this for years. The Night Team's John Perrick is live in Attleboro now with the concerns. John?
Well, Patrice, you can now add Zahara's cannabis here in Attleboro onto the list of potentially impacted dispensaries. I spoke with the inventory manager here. He says a few hundred grams were sold, all of it now gone.
It's crazy because I've never heard nothing like that.
A potentially contaminated batch of cannabis sold at dispensaries across Massachusetts, leaving some customers a little on edge tonight.
Do you think that you could have potentially bought the contaminated cannabis? Well, I wouldn't know, to tell you the truth.
The Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission says the contaminated batch contains unhealthy levels of mold and yeast. The CCC also says these were products that had cleared earlier compliance testing back in the spring.
For most healthy individuals, the risks here are low, but for the 20 to 30% of medical patients who are immunocompromised, mold exposure can lead to serious lung infections, systemic illness, and even hospitalizations.
The CCC adds over 24 dispensaries across Massachusetts had been selling the potentially tainted products for months, one being Zahara's Cannabis here in Attleboro.
Definitely scary.
For some, though, this news isn't a surprise. Praverde Laboratories has been testing products for over a decade, and the founder says he's warned the CCC about this problem before.
We have emails going back over 4.5 years on this specific specific case, and very little movement, very little response.
Christopher Hudala blames inconsistent testing for the potentially tainted batches. His lab uses the U.S. Pharmacopoeia's guidance for culture-based assays, but other labs use PCR tests.
In multiple states, there have been bans on this type of testing for total yeast and mold because of the unreliability of it.
But back in Attleboro, Zahara's is still open for business today.
I don't know what's going to come of it, but people will still keep coming, though.
The store here tells me that the vendor of the potentially tainted product is working to set up a hotline for impacted customers.
A hotline for impacted customers. I hope you're paying my hospital bills too if I end up in the hospital, bro. Because as you guys can see from that, there are people who do have an immunocompromised system, and in that situation, what are you going to do? Something as simple as mold can cause you to get really sick. Heck, there are healthy people who get really sick from mold. But what's really scary is that some of the people who were sold some of this product would probably have no idea that they were sold contaminated product. Truth is, how would you know? Does it smell off? Does it look funny? Sometimes it may not be that simple, especially in a situation where more than a dozen strains have been compromised, and that happened in this situation over in Cali statewide. And sometimes you may think that this is a reputable name, it's a big brand that I'm familiar hearing about, and that's exactly what happened here in Cali as well. Tyson.
That's the Tyson Undisputed cannabis flower that was sold after August 2023. And we've also got the Almora 14 half-gram pre-rolls sold after December 2023. So that's a pretty wide time gap there if you think about end of last year to now in mid-May. The recall due to possible contamination from a fungus that can grow on cannabis plants. So if you purchase those products and consume them, you are encouraged to get in contact with a doctor. And if you have those products on hand now, they say to throw them out to be safe. This fungus can cause significant health risks, especially for those with weakened immune systems. Again, there are 13 products total listed in that recall. So if you've bought any marijuana products at dispensaries throughout the state since late last year, you'll want to read through that full list from the Department of Cannabis Control to see each product impacted on their website.
So it's clear that this is happening across states. It's not limited to certain states, it's happening everywhere. And that clip that I showed you guys over in Cali was literally just a few months back. And where I'm at in Colorado, it's been literally legalized for over 10 years now, 20 if you're talking about medical, but that does not stop recalls from happening and things from running foul. And according to this article right here, we have seen the 4th recall in less than a month. This article was literally posted yesterday. And according to this article, the recall impacts 24 different dispos and includes products sold from March 28th to November 25th of last year. The flagged batches failed mold, yeast, and moisture testing and were grown at the same time and using the same procedures as the harvest batches that were confirmed to be contaminated. Again, they say consumers should destroy or return it to the store from which it was purchased. So you guys can clearly see, it feels like no one is safe. It literally feels like homegrown is the best, cleanest type of medicine that you can get. And that really begs the question, if that's the case, then why does big corporation and big pharma insist on coming into the mix prohibiting home grows? We've seen a lot of instances where local and state governments try to rein in their laws simply because they're not able to tax home growers. Over in Ohio, they're actually reducing the plant limit from 12 to 6 plants. Now, what I personally find really interesting and pretty strange is that a lot of these cultivators actually say that the batches that they have been supplying actually passed testing before it was released, but it turns out that after it was released, different types of contamination were found and those tests, hence the recall. So is it that there's some sort of false positive, some type of issue with the test? Should they be using one test instead of another? This is an issue that really needs to be dug down into because it could cause a lot of health issues for a lot of people. But let's hear what Bud & Mary's group president had to say about this whole thing.
And Bud & Mary's sent Fox 21 a statement saying in part, quote, a recent test at the retail level identified microbial contamination in a batch of our flour. Before release, this batch passed all testing requirements using state-approved third-party labs. More than a month before the advisory went out, we voluntarily contacted all retailers carrying the affected batches.
So it seems that they were saying upon harvest, before it was actually released, they ran a test by a state-approved lab and everything was fine. But after release, things weren't fine. So it raises a lot of questions. I want to find out what you guys think about all that. This is a really interesting story and something that seems to be gathering a lot of pace and a lot of momentum across a lot of different states. And it turns out that with all these forms of rules and regulations, testing for all types of stuff from pesticides, molds, heavy metals, and yeast, there's still contaminants which are being found in medical herb. Now, one thing that is good is that they are being picked up on. We are finding out about it and they are issuing the recalls. In that way, at least there's some sort of proactive method to protecting the safety of consumers. But let me know what you guys think about all this. It's really interesting. Drop it in the comments down below. Share your thoughts down there. And you may not have seen this, but recently there was a situation where voters voted to approve rec, but the lawmakers say that the voters did not know what they were doing. They were confused. Personally, I think it's crazy, but check that video out for yourself and let me know what you think about it because it's coming up right now.